and as couples, to clear your own stuff together, which
I
we
know.
never we never get to do. We only do that in divorce court.
Right. Well, and it usually doesn't even happen in divorce court. It happens in the second, third, fourth marriage, where you're still you're still attracting the same patterns because you're still stuck in your own shit, and you're not going to get out of it until you do the work. So that's just a given, right?
I love it. But to be able to do that, can you imagine what this does for relationships, business relationship, personal?
Welcome to another edition of Psychedelic Sages, where we provide intuitive insights, truth bust, and service watchdogs and guides for topics around spiritual medicines, more commonly referred to as psychedelics. Welcome to another edition of Psychedelic Sages. I'm Beth Bell.
I'm Stephanie Salt.
Today we're going to get into a video that's talking about ketamine. Let's take a look.
This is the place where I had a transformation that changed my life.
We really want to fix things for people. We really are not interested in just Band-Aids.
Day one. Today we're looking into the science of ketamine and NAD. Now, if you've never heard of ketamine or NAD, then you're like most people. That's partly why I'm doing this video, but also because I've seen firsthand how it's affected people with depression, anxiety, and addiction. One of them, oddly enough, being my wife, Haley. So because Haley is such a huge advocate of all of this, I figured the best way to look into the science of it was to do it myself. So we actually have a week-long treatment planned for the both of us with the expert himself, Dr. Conover. Dr. Conover has pioneered this treatment and is one of the world's experts. So as a biologist, naturally, I had a lot of questions, in part because I had never heard about this before until Haley went herself. And in fact, most people I talk to have never heard of it or the benefits. So that seemed like a natural first place to start.
I think NAD is the source of energy. It's the source of energy in the cell. Probably turns off cravings better than any agent or substance that we know about.
A quick refresher for all of you who've taken an introductory biology class. If you open the book up to cellular respiration, that's how we get our energy, the cycles all include NAD. And as you get older, you produce less and less NAD. So it's a little bit of a reset.
Ketamine is the pattern disruptor. And so ketamine allows us to slow down our thinking, shift our perspective, and is becoming more well known for refractory depression, anxiety, PTSD, chronic pain. It's a pattern disruptor.
And the idea of disrupting a pattern is what I wanted to understand more fully, because this is exactly what I saw with Haley.
This was the reset that gave me the opportunity to move forward. And the overall sense of well-being is something that I can't describe because, I never thought that I wouldn't be in that pain and be in that sort of daily slog, much less actually feel good.
So I think it's lovely that this couple is doing this together, because if they're going to start disrupting patterns, I think one of the things that people are always scared about is the big C word, change, right? That their life is going to change, their stories are going to change, they're not going to know how to navigate. And so in this case, it's beautiful because they're both going in to do the work together.
I think so. This is the future of couples therapy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
You don't have to do it for 20 years. You don't have to get divorced and come back and figure out what problems you had before. You don't have to carry all this baggage into new relationships. That's a breakthrough within itself? Yeah. So I'm really quite thrilled. But I have to ask you, Beth. Now I'm gonna bust you on these. Now you've done both of these. What do you think is the difference between the ketamine and psilocybin?
Well, it's a loaded question, because when I did ketamine, I have to say that I did it in a very safe setting. I was very comfortable with who I was with. And at the time, I was very backed up in my intestinal system. I hadn't been able to go. I've had this issue, not to get too private, but I'm going to have to, where if I'm not, I've kind of located it back to, if I'm not feeling safe in my environment, somehow my body stops me from being able to eliminate, and I'm literally full of shit. And I went to do my ketamine when this happened, and I had a very bizarre experience. Everyone talked about ketamine to be very soft and friendly, and just an easy, you get shown the lessons, but in the easiest of ways. I also think it's so beautiful that you realize that it's coming from you, right? It's not Tony Robbins. It's not the ketamine. It's not the this. It's not the that. It's your connection to your higher self and your innate power that has always been there. We just got it so, veiled over time that we just kind of kept trying to get through the veil, right? And what ketamine does is helps you just break right through that and start to see things as they really are. But let's have a listen to what happens with this couple, because I as we said, it's great that they're doing this together.
And for those of you who don't really know Haley, you'd recognize her as the most fun, outgoing person ever, which she is.
And it may be naive to think that we can help change the world for the better, but that's what I want.
But like many of us, she had also been living with a loop of depression that she couldn't logically control.
I was at a point where I would lay down at night and the feeling of dread was, oh no, I'm gonna wake up tomorrow morning and I'll have to do all this again. Because the daily trudge of getting through my own life, which is a wonderful life, but because whatever I had built up in my head over time had changed how I viewed myself. And I was doing so much to combat that. I needed something else.
And Haley was doing all the things.
The adventure continues.
She had a good supportive community. She had a therapist. She was working out, eating well.
Is that a little valley girl?
And finally, through the doctors over the last 7 years, she had multiple SSRIs, but they didn't seem to work.
Ketamine versus an SSRI, which is something like Prozac. Those medicines, once prescribed, take a good 3 to 4 weeks to kick in, whereas ketamine is instantaneous. That's really amazing that you can kind of change someone's landscape or perception of their world almost immediately.
Now here are some interesting facts for you. Somewhere around 10% of people suffer from depression. And of the people that try to get treated for depression, about a third don't respond. It's known as treatment-resistant depression, which is what Haley had. Well, maybe it's the field I'm in, doing media stuff, and it's kind of like ups and downs with jobs. But a lot of people are taking antidepressants. And this was so interesting to me because with Haley, it felt like it worked almost over. It was a week. She came back. The self that she had before was back. Haley's first treatment session was 6 months ago, and she hasn't had any relapses since.
This works really quickly, and it's very safe, and there's really no downside. There just isn't.
And I wanted to see how it would help someone like me, who's not suffering currently from depression, but I also have normal stresses. So I'm not where Haley was. Would it help me? It's not like I'm 100% okay.
And to me, it's also like a little bit of an experiment too,
Kind of,
because
maybe.
Because I want to see what it does for you.
Mm-hmm. From the safety perspective, Dr. Conover had me convinced it's okay. Let's start this treatment, see how it goes. And of course, I'm not naive either. From my perspective, if it doesn't work at all, the downside would be that I just spent an entire week and it's not a cheap treatment. So we'll see. And that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Are you nervous? Or anything?
A little bit. Oddly, I'm nervous that I'm not going to get my playlist set up. At this point, I didn't know what to expect. I knew I needed a good music track. Check. That helps block out the sounds, allows me to focus. The eye shades do the same for visual stimuli. Then they started the IV drip. Inside that bag was NAD, and that honestly feels uncomfortable. It is medicine though. The ketamine comes in part to help with that discomfort, but it also takes you somewhere else, a good place, a place to heal. Here's what happened to me.
Okay, so he's about to go on his journey. And I also, I don't mean to sound judgy on this, but when he's looking for his playlist, it's like, ooh, I'm like, it's great. But sometimes our playlists are also just facilitating our storylines, right? Like I think about some of the artists that I've liked over the years. I'm like, oh gosh, she sings a lot about broken hearts, and it's like, well, so I'm just a little bit sensitive around the playlist. And I wish that there was, I'm not saying that there's one for everyone, but there's higher vibrational hertz that you can listen to. There's different things that can impact your journey differently. So I'm kind of curious how they approach that and why he would sort of let them just do whatever playlist that they want, because music sound is so important in as far as what kind of a trip you're going to have, how it's going to influence the trip, because you're so open. What's your thought on that?
Oh, absolutely. I think the sound therapy is one of the most important things, and it goes hand in hand, certainly with psilocybin and every other psychedelic I've ever done. The music was one of the most important things. The music caused the mechanism for this inner healing work to go on, and it could be geometric patterns that the ancients were quite adept at. And I think even when you listen to Mozart and Beethoven in particular, these are all chords, but they have geometric healing vibrations, mathematical formulations that kind of are intricately associated and work really wonderfully powerful with the plants. Yeah. So it's so funny. He's looking for this play, and it's very ego too, in a weird way.
Yeah,
that he has to have his playlist. But I know that the shaman that I've worked with have their own journey playlist that is critical to the success of the group, and I think the inner workings of what's going on. I certainly have learned to chant because of being involved with those playlists from the very first time I had a journey. So I think the music is really, really important.
Yeah, I do too. Well, let's hear more about what he has to say. I think he's about ready to go into his journey.
About 5 minutes after I got my ketamine shot, I knew my inhibitory neurons were being shut off and I was getting a flood of the neurotransmitter glutamate. It felt like I was entering a weird dream. Geometric shapes twisted and pulled. It felt like I was viewing life from beginning to end without time. At times I swirled up and then I sank down. The best I can say is it felt like this, a head floating in the void. That was me. And then I looked around and I saw people in my life. And at this stage, well, telling you all of what I saw might be as interesting as when you explain a dream to someone. So let's just say I felt connected all of a sudden to everyone. All the way from the planets to the cells in my body. It also made me really feel like what I was doing right now was so important. I had a huge purpose. So for 40 minutes, I journeyed through the space and time set in motion by the music I listened to. It was epic. And I know I couldn't bring everything I experienced back, but it was a neat feeling of well-being that surrounded me when I woke up. And this is when I started to come back to reality.
Oh, back on Earth. It's crazy.
You went to a different place. It doesn't happen for everybody.
Not everybody goes to a different place.
I don't know.
Like I wasn't even part of this world anymore. and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, there's my fingers again. Oh, is that my leg? Yep. I'm back on Earth. Yes.
When I had my first treatment, I couldn't even talk.
Afterwards?
No, yeah, I was just like, I'm okay.
This was just one of the treatments. I did the treatment 5 times in total over the course of the week.
Day 1.
Day 2.
3, 4, 5.
Every time I thought through what my intentions were, I meditated through the session and then recovered afterwards with Haley. We went on walks in the garden where we got married. This is where we got married? On the beach where she grew up.
Okay, so we've just seen him come back to planet Earth, and as the shamans often say, examining the particulars of who we really are, because we come back into this body and we go, oh, okay, no, we're really here. Because, and as they said, that doesn't happen for everyone. I think that the important part is to have a foundation prior to coming in, whether that's a support team, having done some other spiritual work, having once you go out there, it's all about the bridge and being able to bridge what you saw. And as he said, like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to bring back, because over time we do start to lose some of the remembrance. But that's where the integration work comes in, and we really have to work on integrating these higher levels of consciousness. Otherwise, we just fall back into the numbness of our external environment and continue to let our external environment run us, as opposed to our internal operating system, which is run by our higher self, our soul, and therefore our higher good.
So true. But isn't it wonderful to have the mechanism to release your story or release your trauma and go back into another state of consciousness that that is so happy and so elevated and so aware and clear? I think this breakthrough, the ketamine, I think in the psilocybin also, is and you can even see the difference in the way the couple looked.
Yeah. Yeah. Their energy, their whole
Completely.
ambiance about themselves. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's a beauty of this, to be able to do this and as couples, to clear your own stuff together, which
I
we
know.
never we never get to do. We only do that in divorce court.
Right. Well, and it usually doesn't even happen in divorce court. It happens in the second, third, fourth marriage, where you're still you're still attracting the same patterns because you're still stuck in your own shit, and you're not going to get out of it until you do the work. So that's just a given, right?
I love it. But to be able to do that, can you imagine what this does for relationships, business relationship, personal relationships between mother and child, which I've had that experience. It is just the possibilities are really, really phenomenal and infinite.
Yeah. And the other thing I really like about this couple is that she came in with heavy depression, was still living a great life. And I think there's so many people that suffer this that we just don't even know. We just don't know what's behind their whole aura and their energy, and they don't know how to really get to it, but they deal with it every day. But then he comes from this other perspective where he's like, yeah, I recognize I have some shit, but I'm not really suffering. I'm not suffering to the same degree. I don't have that. And him still coming in and doing the session and having that experience, because we all have it. We have trauma. We have something that's come through, a storyline that's not serving our higher good. And so
he's not suffering yet. Women, sometimes we suffer, but we have to multitask. We have children to raise. You can see she had her child there to raise. So we have to put all of that on the back burner and still perform and still show up for so many other people other than ourselves. So I'm glad that she had the courage to say, you know what, something may not be right here. Let me see what I can do to fix this.
Yeah, I think it's great. And it would be great for many other couples. I love how you framed it as like the new couples therapy. Yeah, it's great. We'll learn more about ketamine and many more videos to come, and some comparisons to some of the other psychedelics that are out there available for the awakening and healing of humanity.
Absolutely. That was great.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning into this episode. If you like what you hear, please give us a thumbs up below and hit the bell and be the first to receive updates. Visit our Patreon site, Psychedelic Sages, for more in-depth information.